Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at the Base Centre today for a topic that's very close to my heart, data and AI in energy net zero XYZ. So very exciting. We are being live streamed today, so be aware the microphones are for the audience at home. And being streamed at a later date to the listeners and people in the community and so on and so forth. We'll fire into some of that in a minute. Housekeeping stuff, no fire drills planned, so if one does go off, we'll go and collect outside there somewhere. Not much else you need to know. My name's Adam Sroka. I'm a professional loudmouth, but I sit on the board of the Data Lab Innovation Board and love doing events like this, love trying to help and bring the community together and do some of this stuff to really showcase the interesting businesses and the research that's being done in Scotland and how we are moving the needle on some really interesting topics, especially net zero tonight. This is part of the Data Lab community's Data and AI for Net Zero theme. If you're not a member, you're missing out. So QR code here or come and pester any of us after the session. But yeah, that's like 5,000 people strong now, 80 odd countries all around the world. And great place to just go in and meet other data nerds in and around. Probably very Scotland centric, but again, it's a global organization. They do some more than just these events. There's some brilliant programs within the community. There's like mentorship programs, there's peer groups, there's like industry sort of aligned things, there's job boards. So it's a good place to go and check out like after the session or tomorrow or whatever when you get a spot of time and get to meet other like-minded folk and meet up for other sort of such stuff. We're about to roll into, I'm probably going off piste here now, but we're about to roll into Data Fest, which we'll cover later in slides. Or the Fringe is the first one. There are slides later, so we'll get onto that. But there's a big host of events coming, so watch this space. Tonight, though, we're joined by 4 super talented speakers who are going to talk us through what they're doing, their work, their organizations, and how that's making a difference and how data and AI has an impact and can really drive net zero outcomes. That's going to be followed up by a panel discussion where I'll throw them some questions and see if I can get them to have a really good fight on stage about something really heated. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to pass it over to you to think of even better questions. And I'll dotter about with the mic and be sure to stand up, put your hand up, project your voice, all that, and get involved in the discussion. Once that's all done, we'll save a little bit of time at the end for some community call-outs as well. I'll explain that when we get to it. And then networking at the end. Do us a favour, jump on LinkedIn, tag the Data Lab, sort of talk about the event, post on your socials and things like that. This is a free event that costs like time and effort and energy of like talented people to come and run and give up their free time to organise, and it does help just promote and spread the message and the impact that the Data Lab has by getting involved and showing people that you're here at an event, lovely room, like free food and drink and interesting people to come and meet and speak with. And you never know, someone in your network might be out there wishing that they could meet like-minded folks in this space, in this kind of part of the world. So we talked about the Data Lab community. What have I missed on that? Nothing, I've covered all that. The next one, right, so that's me done for all my waffle, you'll be glad to know. Really appreciate, again, you all coming and joining us today. Any questions about other stuff, be sure to jump on some of the speakers at the end of the session. If they're too busy, you might get stuck with me, that's fine, I'll answer questions too. But I'll hand over now to our first speaker, who is Andrew Sudmant from the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute. If you would like to get started.
Let me just start by thanking the Data Lab and the community for having me today and for hosting these events, because they're just a fantastic way to meet a lot of people who are working on similar things and working on things that are maybe just a little bit adjacent to what you're working on, which I find is where you can really learn about, really kind of stretch what you're currently working on. I work at the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute, and my focus is the co-benefits of climate action, but I'm part of a wider team that is working on the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service. Jamie here will speak to that very briefly at the end, but it's a program that's working with the local authorities to understand what climate action are we taking today and how do we accelerate that climate action so that we meet our climate targets. So that's the wider program that we're a part of, and I'd love to speak to any of you who are interested in that after the presentation. So as I mentioned, my work is on the co-benefits of climate action. The co-benefits are all the indirect benefits. Climate action is focused on reducing GHG emissions primarily. And then the next thing we usually think about are the direct impacts. How is energy use, how are energy bills affected by climate action? And those metrics are really important, obviously, especially the impact on emissions. But what we found with some of our research is that most of the impacts of climate action are not actually necessarily on emissions or on energy use or energy bills. Most of the impacts are on wider social considerations. So what do I mean by this? Well, when you retrofit your house or when you change the way you travel to work, your first consideration is probably not GHG emissions. When you retrofit your house, you're doing that because you want to improve where you live. It's to do with shelter. When we invest in bike lanes or new bus services, that's to improve mobility. These social impacts are usually the primary reasons we take actions that are also climate actions. So there's this funny way that the co-benefits story is actually sort of backwards. The co-benefits are actually the main reason we often take actions that are climate actions. And we found in our research, a program of research funded by UKRI, that if you look at programs of climate action, the benefits that are social benefits, things like improved health or reduced visits to the NHS or improved mobility, they are usually several times larger than the direct financial impacts. So that's our starting point. And from that, we are beginning to wonder, well, how do these benefits differ across the UK? How can we understand these benefits to better inform climate action? How do these help us to understand different pathways to net zero, and which local areas are benefiting the most and least? So first of all, we find that the context really matters. This is not surprising if you think about it. If you have a climate action that's in an urban area that affects air quality, that's going to have a larger impact on public health than in a rural area. And we find that the differences can be kind of an order of magnitude. So context really matters in terms of the scale of co-benefits of action. Second, we find that the different actions that you take, they have a really big impact on the kinds of benefits you have and on the scale of those benefits. So here we're looking at collections of actions from the Climate Change Committee. They put together different plans for how we can get to net zero. And you can see there are different sets of benefits and there's different scales of benefits. And so this is again, it's not necessarily surprising. Obviously, if we focus more on people using non-motorized transport relative to electric vehicles, there are different benefits. But the scale of the benefits, the scale of the difference here is what's striking. And finally, we find that there are these real questions of distribution across the population. If you look at households that are wealthier and poorer, it's clear that our current climate action plans benefit some households more than others. And what this is telling us is that the way we conduct climate action, it's strongly embedded and connected with wider social challenges, whether these be leveling up or whether these be energy bills, crises, or the productivity crisis we're continuing to face. There's a lot of connections between these things. So we have this model and we have these general understandings that there are relationships between climate action and social benefits that seem to be important. What are we doing with this? Why is this sort of useful? What the Data Lab has allowed us to do is to not only develop this research and look at these findings and think about this in an academic way, but to approach these questions and really try to be involved in what's happening in the real world. And we're doing this in two ways. The first is we've been working with local area energy plans. So local area energy plans have huge collections of measures. You look at a local authority or a region and you consider all of the things that could be brought together to affect climate change and energy use. And then what has been done in a number of places is that these have been brought together, and because there's a large number of measures and a large amount of potential investment, the local authorities go to investors and try to build an investment case. And for example, in Bristol, they have this thing called the Bristol Leap, which is a large investment plan for the city. And what we're trying to contribute, and an example here is for Westminster, is to look at what the total social benefits are. And this helps us to understand what are the different kinds of investors that might want to be involved? What is the extent to which the local authority might want to subsidize this investment? What is the extent to which this is pure private investment? So here we have the benefits annually by type for the Westminster local area plan, and you can see there's sort of £5 to £6 million of these social wider benefits that can be realized. The second way that we are developing this work, and in fact sort of the primary way, is to connect our work to the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service. The Scottish Climate Intelligence Service is a lot of things here, but it's bringing together and thinking about all of the action happening in Scotland. It's using data and intelligence to understand these, what is happening, and it's looking to accelerate what's happening. And I'm going to turn it just briefly here now to Jamie to speak.
Yeah, I'm conscious. I'm Jamie Brogan. I'm the head of climate partnerships at the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute. Constitute conscience. We've had our 7 minutes. Sorry, I'm not going to talk you through all of that. I'm going to give you, well, I hope a bit of hope and a bit of a call to action. Net zero is this big and complicated challenge which we have to fix. It's not a technology challenge anymore. We have the technologies to live as a net zero society now. It's a problem of priorities and decision making. So the good thing for you guys in this room is that decision making is driven by data, and you have a chance to do something about that. In Scotland, the thing that we're doing is setting up this national programme that Andrew's introduced there, the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service, which is essentially there to help local authorities to embed climate impact into their decision making and drive the kind of net zero targets of the Scottish Government. So what we're doing from a data perspective in that is not very clever. I mean, we're using a big clunky data set that's kind of compiled at a national level and applying a whole bunch of learning to use that to inform decisions. What makes that frustrating is that there's a long lag time from the decisions that we make and the actions that we take to knowing whether they actually had the impact that we want in terms of emissions reduction. So my call to action for the data community is any of you who can help us to kind of bring that more live, to either future model through AI or to talk about how we can measure things quicker, then we'd love to talk to you about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some contact details there for those that are interested in, or as I said earlier, catch people in the networking session towards the end. So we're going to fire straight into the next talk. Honoured to be joined by Emily Seward, Head of Data Applications at Intelligent Growth Solutions, a very cool company.
Thank you very much. All right. Yes, so I'm Emily. I run a data team at Intelligent Growth Solutions. And first of all, I'll quickly go through what vertical farming is, a tiny bit on how it can contribute to net zero, and then I've got a case study to talk about how we're using some data and AI in our company to move in that direction. So what's vertical farming? Increasingly people actually know, so I might start skipping this in a couple of talks' time. But in essence, traditional farming, I sometimes call it horizontal farming. You have a field that's spread out horizontally in front of you. With vertical farming, you take that field, you chop it up, you stack it on top of itself inside a warehouse, and you control that environment and grow the crops indoors. So it's got a lot of potential advantages in terms of protecting that growing area from external climate variables, being able to control it, and all of that. But as I will talk about, it has a couple of other levers that mean it's not always the right solution, depends where you are, what you're growing. So how does this tie into net zero? I think we're all aware of food miles, fertilizer, pesticide use, all of these things that can contribute to greenhouse gases and can be detrimental to the environment. The opportunity to grow in a vertical farm means that you can get away from some of that. So you can have these farms very centrally located so that your food miles are very short. You can be very water efficient, and you can get much higher yields than you would get in a traditional outdoor horizontal farm. You can also grow year-round as well, so it gives you a lot of stability in terms of the produce that you're growing and being able to provide it year-round. But as I've put on here, it does require additional inputs, so you need the energy for the lighting and the environmental control. So it's not always the most environmentally friendly way of doing it, but it generally can have a lot of benefits if you just take the whole picture in mind. So as you can imagine, this sort of a setup generates loads and loads of data. It's a really cool area to work in. I really enjoy it. You've got your data coming in from the machinery, you've got your data about the environment and the factors that are impacting your crop, and you've also got your crop data as well to play with. So there's a huge range of things I can talk about here, but I've honed in on one of my favorite apps that we're building, which is meant to make the grower's life a little bit easier and a little bit, helps them with some of the decision making. And that is to do with tracking your crops. So it's top of the crops because you're tracking the top of the crop. We also call it the crop height tracker, which is maybe a little bit more boring. So the background for this is that lots of factors impact your crop as it grows. The amount of light, the nutrients, the temperature, the genetics of the crop, all of that can change it. And when you're growing your crop, if you have a condition A, and you see your crop growing faster, and you have a condition B and you see it growing slower, that can give you some information about the health of the crop, how it's doing, and you can use that to improve your growing algorithms and over time get the yields as high as they possibly can be. So that's the premise, that's what we're trying to do. But to be able to do this, we need to do it automatically. You can't have someone, well, you could, but it would be very time consuming to have someone going through all of the pictures, plotting this, drawing it. It would just take forever and it wouldn't be very economic. So what we do is we have an automatic way of capturing the images, and then we use computer vision to generate graphs like this. So on the left here, you can see an example of a basil growth curve. So the images underneath correspond to the dots that they're pointing to. The images are captured normally twice a day, although we can set that to whatever frequency we want. And the app then plots these, and you can see over time how the basil is growing from a very small crop to a much bigger crop. And that's really interesting, that's really good, but it also gives us loads of insight. So in this, we call them a growth job. In this example on the right, you can see, maybe it's a little subtle at the back, but you can maybe see that I was purposefully drought stressing this crop. So I stopped the watering, and then if that happened and no one was looking, the crop would obviously die because there's no rainfall, you're indoors. But here you can see how the growth curve is kind of going up. The growth starts slowing, and that's before there's any visible wilting of the crop. So that's when we might be able to go in and be like, oh, something's odd, something is looking weird. The growth slowed. Then the crop started wilting, which manifests as like it looks smaller because it kind of shrinks in on itself. Watered it, and then it took off again. So this is just an example of using computer vision to do this. I think I've dived in. Yeah, I did. And we also, so there's a lot of chat about AI. It has its place. It's often a good tool, but it's not always what we use. So a lot of our apps don't contain AI. This one actually does, which is again why I pulled it out. So we have a need in this app to be able to know what is crop and what is the background of the crop. Originally, we were doing this without AI, so we were just looking at green pixel segmentation. You can normally pull out your crop, it's green, and the background isn't normally very green. Doesn't work so well when you've got purple basil or red lettuce or something like that. But anyway, that was fine, but we need to be a bit cleverer than that. So we used an AI model to start doing that segmentation for us. So again, you train it, and then now when we feed that an image, it has the the model prediction. So the purple background is what it thinks is background, and the yellow is what it thinks is crop. And you can see that the prediction is very close to the actual truth mask. So that was the data that was used to train it. This plays. I don't know if I can hit that. Was it playing when I... Oh, there you go. Isn't that cool? Oh, I love it. And this is actually a slightly old version. It's even better now. So yeah, there's your AI. I'm very happy to chat in a bit more detail about that. And I think I wanted to finish on this one. So I said we normally take 2 images a day, and that gives you the sort of curves that were on the 2 slides ago. In this one, I took an image every hour. So I don't know if we've got any biologists in the room. You know when you travel overseas and you get jet lag, it's when your circadian rhythm gets out of whack because you're not tuned into the day-night cycle. Plants have the same thing, so they have a natural day-night rhythm, and for a plant, they often manifest it with their leaves going up and down in response to day and night. And what you can see, look at it! Look at that! Isn't it amazing? So the yellow bars are when the lights are coming on and off, and you can see this wavy motion of the crop. You can see it on the left, but you can also, luckily, see it in our app, and you can see that sort of circadian rhythm in the plants. And I just love the fact that we can have that level of detail being picked up in these graphs. This is one of my favorite gifts that the team have built. Again, it's a little bit old now, but I keep coming back to it. And I think that was me talking very quickly, but I got through. Thank you. All right.
Keen to know if the Basil gets jet lag, but I'll ask that later. So next up, we are joined by Gavin Johnston from I'm going to say BEST, and let you introduce yourself, because this is a long old title.
Yeah, we're super humble. It isn't BEST, it is, in fact, BEST. So it's Built Environment Smarter Transformation. We used to be Construction Innovation Centre for Scotland, but we rebranded when we changed our mission towards net zero built environment to encompass everything within the built environment, not just the construction sector as well. And we have a mission to accelerate the just transition to net zero carbon. Why am I here today to talk to you is about a project that we're running that should probably be called towards a national existing buildings database, because we don't have one. When we started this project, this is very early stages, it's a scoping exercise. People will queue up to tell you that this already exists, that there are multiple projects, multiple work strands out there, this data exists and it's readily available. Why are we doing this? That is in fact slightly true, but it's not the whole picture, and nothing joins these things together, so that's what we're wanting to work on. So why have we chosen to focus on it? Well, it's because of the information there is that we have a very poor quality and energy inefficient housing stock in this country, and it's all likely still to be there when we've got our net zero targets. So how do we get where we are just now? So in terms of this graph, the dots with not very much line on the graph is the standards that we know that we can achieve in terms of our new build performance and in terms of retrofit performance to Enerfit standard AACB LETI. So these are energy performance models for buildings. And by rough archetype, this is where our current building stock sits. So we have a space heating demand, which is measured in kilowatt hours per square metre per annum. That is how we model and assess how well our buildings are performing in terms of energy efficiency, but we haven't agreed that as a metric yet. So we have to get to the point where we're all speaking the same language and we all agree that this is what we want to achieve, and then agree what the number is in which we need to move particular property types towards that line to get to net zero, to allow us to decarbonise the heat source within the properties themselves. So how are we doing this? Well, what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand the data gathered by local authorities and social landlords in the first place, because they have large estates, so it's not individual properties. And what we're trying to see is how is that data stored, how is it managed, how are they using it, and what are the tools and systems in order to map out the landscape of this to say, actually, this is quite disparate. People don't have what you think they have. And a lot of times the ask is when we come to fund these projects is, tell us about what you're going to achieve, where should we focus our investment, and actually that isn't all that possible. So the aspiration for the project is around getting to a data set that allows us to model the existing energy performance, model the potential improvements that we can make to that, and then move towards an archetypal analysis, which is to break down a property to say, actually, on an individual basis, we've got X number of this property type in this area, and that property type gets this level of investment to reduce the demand by this much. And what we do is we try to feed that into and map these other projects that we're aware of to eventually move towards something that people were calling, this is research done by the National Retrofit Hub, which is for the whole of the UK, around a building digital logbook or a passport or a digital twin, the various different ideas and terms. But I like the graphic because it pretty much picks up on what we're talking about. All of these different data sets exist in some form of accessible format out there. How do we bring that together to help us to build these models? The NRH have also helpfully done is a database of databases. So you can go into the database and you can find where a database might sit that you might have access to. We're up there as well, and if can't quite see it, Energy Savings Trust EPC register. So that's the most common data set that people use for this. So what that is a database of all the lodged EPCs for all versions of lodged EPCs and cloning of assumed EPCs based on what your neighbour's house is you potentially have in terms of performance. The issue with that is confidence in that data set. So that's part of our research here is we're asking people, well, what is the blocker? Why can't you use that as your data set? And what we're finding is, well, there's a lot of EPC bashing that goes on. I have partaken in that in times. But really what it does is it erodes the confidence in this idea of modelling. And what we're trying to do is build that back up by saying, actually, a well-maintained data set can be used effectively to help us to accelerate towards net zero. So in terms of our mission, what is it we see this as being able to do? Well, we think it can tie into other work streams. So we've got, we could look at it in terms of targeting programs of work based on the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. So you could use that to identify areas of fuel poverty and overlay the data set. You could use it for grid balancing, which is also another blocker to decarbonisation because people will line up to tell you that the grid can't take all of these houses coming off of the gas grid. And also we want to give supply chain confidence. So we want our supply chain, our built environment, our contractors, everyone to upscale and move into net zero as an industry. And we believe this is a tool that we could use to give them that confidence. So the impact we would have is accelerating that uptake of skills. We want to get cheaper, faster, and more efficient delivery of retrofit properties. And we want to improve the quality and accuracy of the data that we're gathering and give people confidence in what it is they're doing. We have two other projects, just briefly, that I think we can build upon. So we have built this as the Construction Industry Data Dashboard, which is a dashboard that we maintain along with the Construction Leadership Forum that scrubs data from various open sources across government to show what is happening in the construction sector for Scotland, to give industry that confidence in where is the money being spent, where is investment worthwhile, and to actually understand what patterns are out there. And we think we could apply that. And similarly as well, we've got the Construction Pipeline Forecast tool, which shows you geographic hotspots. So if we were to extrapolate that out in an energy efficiency net zero sense, what we potentially could say is, if you're in this area here, around all of this cluster of houses that are likely to get this level of upgrade of EWI, external wall insulation, IWI, internal wall insulation, or double glazing, triple glazing, it might be a good idea to either A, upskill your staff in doing that, invest in that area, or start manufacturing those products. And hopefully that would accelerate us towards decarbonisation of the existing housing stock. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Brilliant talk, not an easy problem to solve. Our last talk of the night is from Lily Bell, who is recently CTO of Map Impact. Am I right? Yes. Yes, if you'd like to come up and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lily. So I'm the CTO of Map Impact, as was mentioned, and our mission is to help nature count. That's the tagline. And essentially, the idea is that we believe that nature can be improved in harmony with human. We believe that nature can be improved in harmony with human development. We don't really call ourselves a tech company in so much as we're an environmental service company, and that everything we do is in service to the environment. So helping nature count, so what does that mean? Well, I quite like powers of three, so we're going to go through the importance of ecological mapping, how we help nature count as a company, and also the lessons learned from the English Local Nature Recovery Strategies, which is a programme of work to improve on the existing nature environment at a local authority level in England. So I guess I want to start off with a little bit of history, and I do that because my other gig is that I'm on the Historic Environment Scotland Archaeological Finds panel. And essentially, the term ecology was invented in 1869, as mentioned there. And remote sensing has been tied to ecological and landscape monitoring for a long time. The San Francisco earthquake in the early 1900s, for example, aerial balloons were used for the quantification of impact on the ground from the perspective of insurance, and that has been done ever since via pigeon, via UAV drones, and also indeed via satellites, which is what we focus on as a company, though we are relatively agnostic to that. Now, I guess from a definition perspective, I often use a lot of words that are very similar, and so we're going to go to the English dictionary, which in the terms of habitat states that it's a natural environment in which flora and fauna live, that biosphere is a part of the planet's environment where life exists, and biogeography is the science thereof that. Now, I'm just making sure I keep up with this. So from an ecological mapping perspective, there's a lot of questions that arise. If I can get that there. So the question is how we measure nature, the different mapping schemas, surveying techniques, and the level of granularity and accuracy of that data, and how we measure change over time as well. So UK biodiversity is not in a great state at the moment. So the UK is at the bottom, in the bottom 10% of the 240 countries from biodiversity intactness, and the species have declined by 19%. You can see that across both vegetation and also, I guess as a plug for the moment, that the charity Butterfly Conservation currently have their Great Butterfly Count open, and I highly recommend downloading the app. However, most of the species of butterfly in the UK are in decline, and that's part of the reason for doing that work. Now, at Map Impact, we produced a data layer called Biodiversity View, and the idea is that we have a nationwide on-demand report of the status of biodiversity for all of the UK on an H3 hexagon level 11, which is essentially a spatial unit. The reason we choose hexagons is because the geometric relationship between bordering, I guess, spatial units is greater than, say, a grid square, because it's got a greater number of neighbours. And we aim to provide an estimation of biodiversity condition on a 50-metre basis, supplying that to landowners and local authorities, using satellite data as a screening tool to go alongside an ecological survey, but not to replace ecologists. And the reason for that is because the sector itself, according to the Chartered Institute for Environmental Management, is in crisis because the amount of ecological work required is greater than the number of ecologists that are currently working in the sector. And that's only increasing with legislation like biodiversity net gain. Now, the reason that we use satellites is that we can get a consistent, repeatable, and objective measurement of the status of vegetation on the ground based on the spectral response of shooting light at the ground and measuring the response in the electromagnetic spectrum. So you can see there, that represents 66 million distinct data points for all of England. Scotland is about 42 million, and Wales, I think, is 14 million. And those are all compared to each other on a habitat by habitat basis, such that every unit of wetland within a regional boundary is compared to all the other wetland to define what the condition of that is. And that's a fairly unique data set available off the shelf at that national level. So there are many habitat types. So we follow the UK HAB schema, and you can see there are 33 different types that are represented in the data set there, and we are a UK HAB partner. And on that hexagon level, we assign a habitat based on the highlighting the highly distinctive habitats that exist in that space, and then getting to a condition score using a range of satellite-based indices from the Sentinel-2 mission, which we've tuned with our ground sourcing and ecological data to understand what does good, moderate, and poor look like in terms of each individual hexagon across the entire country. So, for example, you may have a polygon here of modified grassland that will intersect with a number of hexagons, other neutral grassland and lowland meadows, and we compare them to all the other examples of those on a land parcel on a hexagon basis, based on their overlap with those land parcels. And that's how we get to a condition measurement that spans across the country. We use data from the summer period each year, so between April to September, and then we crunch that on a national basis. And the reason we use satellite data is we can also travel back into the past as well to understand the change in the habitat condition over time. As I mentioned before, we use the hexagons because of their greater number of spatial neighbours compared to a standard square cell, and also because nested grids are possible. So we can look at larger sized hexagons because of their hierarchical relationship, and essentially model the condition on that basis. So local nature recovery strategies, the final part. So there are 48 responsible bodies in England, and they tie together local authorities within their boundaries with the goal of improving the quality of nature within that space. And they have to come out with a local map that shows the current state of habitats and condition. And we're working with them to help them produce those maps, because that type of condition data is generally not available for the period required. So you can see the way that our data overlays on top of that. The dark green colours there are where high condition habitats are. I guess this is kind of a long slide, but it focuses on the lessons learned from local nature recovery and how we address them. Having that national level regularly available data set that allows us to provide data on a hexagon level to a local authority without requiring them to do their own work in terms of understanding all the habitats that exist within their patch, which they generally don't know aside from the high priority habitats. And also we provide data directly into a GIS interface, the reason being that many organizations, and I'm sure people are familiar with it, have far too many dashboards to look at, and we want them to be able to compare their data in a common data environment like that. But yeah, that's the idea. Biodiversity view, an effective screening tool to help nature count. Thank you.
Another really interesting topic. So I'm sure you've got lots of questions. I certainly do. If I could invite our speakers back to the stage once they've picked their mics up, we'll get into the panel discussion. So yeah, please welcome our speakers back to the stage and start thinking of any good questions you might want to have. Do clap. Don't mind me. So I want to start with one that I'm interested to hear. We've had a mix of like startups, commercial organizations, and some sort of some university, like public funded projects talked through here tonight, right? In the experience of the panel, how do you feel like the education of the end user and the end customer or like service user needs to be? Do you find it easy and you have to explain the why, or is it quite a challenge and do you have to link it back to commercial outcomes?
From our perspective, yes, you have to link it back to commercial outcomes when dealing with the construction sector or asking someone to build this, and think about how it can be commercialised and who pays for it is a question. From an end user client perspective, yes, you have to do education as well to do a bit of a, this is why you need this information. And it goes back to what I said before about people think they have information that they may otherwise not have.
Well, similar, I think it's when you explain top of the crops to people, they generally understand how it can be used. But a lot of farmers aren't always completely natural with it. They do need a little bit of explanation, but generally once you chat about it, they get it. Depends on their experience with using data to do all of this decision making versus being a bit more instinctive about it.
I was told I was in the way of the camera, so we'll go over here so you're not having to look off the side of the stage. Lily?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we generally follow a legislative-led approach. So the people that we talk to, and for example, local authorities, they tend to have a legal requirement that drives them to do it, or for example, a fitness to practice when selling to, for example, the conveyancing or legal sector, where they have a driver that is almost non-commercial. But I guess, yes, it's something of a challenge to get people to come down that line, especially when they don't have as much of a background in spatial data to understand this is, more valuable than, say, paying for a manual survey, for example, or performing business as usual.
Andrew?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's a really good question, and in the climate space might be a little bit different from the areas of the other speakers. I think there's been this shift and there's this challenge because in climate change, we've focused on the energy grid to date. That's where most of the actions happened, and we've developed these business models. So when it comes to investing in offshore wind, there's enormous amounts of money, and to a certain extent, there's an idea now that we have solved that part of the challenge. But then when it comes to retrofitting a home or building a bike lane, we really have this challenge because those aren't things that we do for financial reasons in the same way that we don't build a school for financial reasons to a certain extent. So I don't want to say we're sort of educating the client because that, comes across the wrong way, but trying to think through how do we realize these changes with the client, with the people we're working with is a big part of the co-benefits challenge and discussion.
Very good. And yeah, I think you can sometimes see that people get it quickly, and other times it's a struggle to kind of bring them on the journey with you and realize what it is you're almost trying to help with. To flip that around then, so we've talked about end users, what about skills acquisition and the talent in the marketplace? How are you finding it easy, hard to hire people with the right skills? And for people in the audience that may be fresh out of uni, it's the summer, right? Or what kind of advice would you give about breaking into these kinds of roles?
I'm really lucky. I've got a really great team that we've built up over the last couple of years. One thing that's worked really well for us is interns, so having them over the summer. One of our interns from last summer, we had 3. One of those is starting in a couple of weeks, and it's really nice to have been able to get them excited. It was actually his work that I was showing, so it just shows how people without as much commercial experience can still really contribute and learn and get excited and get the tools. He had a good mentor who's sitting in the audience here. So yeah, generally really nice to be able to train people up like that. But I think the other way we tend to get people in is it's an exciting topic, and we have quite we have a fun team that people generally are excited to work with. Very lucky for that, yeah.
I guess I would agree on the internship side, and not to plug for another organisation, but we work with the UK Space Agency in terms of geospatial with their SpinTerm programme, and I highly recommend it for anyone looking to get into the space industry.
So this seems like kind of a setup because we are hiring people and we would love to speak with you. And there are certain skill sets we're looking for. There are some positions that are more data focused, and there are some positions that are more focused on working with members of local authorities, for example. But what we're really looking for are people who are, looking to learn and enthusiastic about their role, and willing to kind of embrace some of the challenges that we really don't have any answers to teach you. So. Not sure if that answers the question, but just selfishly, if you're interested in climate action, please come to the pizza after.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a job to offer, but within construction, built environment, we are slightly behind the curve, and I think it's a sector that has to rapidly modernise, and I think anyone moving into that space, you should see the scale of the opportunity in terms of retrofit, new build, anything in terms of data-led or even technology-led. That's what built environment smart transformation exists to do, to try and bring the construction industry maybe even into the 20th century. Like that would be fantastic. A lot of our processes, I feel a bit out of place here tonight. So yeah.
So off the back of that, I think in my experience, one of the most damaging things that happens in that modernisation when you're bringing an organisation or an industry on a journey is the kind of magpie shiny new thing syndrome. So do you think the current hype cycle around like AI and ChatGPT, XYZ is harmful or helpful in developing some of that higher level engagement and for the construction industry, but also to the other panelists as well in your industries?
From what I've experienced and what we see is the shiny thing helps to get people in the door, and then it's about a filtered down version of that then goes through and becomes widely adopted, and that's what we've found success in, is actually that there is tremendous value in doing the big project, the shiny pilot, because the learning that you can take from that, the aspiration, it definitely does feed in. And then what we try to do is take it at kind of both ends of the spectrum, where you go in at the high level, but then also come in at the education level at colleges and universities and try and embed it in the new workforce that are going to come through, and expect that, things have changed and they'll drive that change forward.
I guess I would say my take on, I guess, the different reasons for people being excited or hyped about the sector is whatever floats your boat. I think that anything that encourages passion in someone is a good thing, and if that's what makes gives them inspiration to work in the sector, they'll quickly be disavowed of the things that are wrong, but they will have got that spark in the first place, and that's more important than anything else. Just stop sending applications written by ChatGPT. It's very obvious.
Any further thoughts? No?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And so, slight change. I'm not going to go on to politics, but do you think across organisations and across the kind of public-private sector boundary, enough is being done to, from a data point of view and a skills and a talent and a projects point of view, to accelerate this? And or do you see any like massive gaps that would maybe spark some interest or make a significant dent in kind of what you're doing or what other industries are doing?
Bowed out of the last one, I'll take this one. I think we are seeing a change in skills in the team. So a lot of the team, for example, in the last few years, have started using Copilot to help speed up their work. And I think that's a relatively new way of working, trying to be more productive, and people are using it differently. But yeah, 5 years ago, the same team would not have been doing that. So I think we're seeing an upskilling already in people already in the workforce. And then I think there is a lot of excitement around it. I've certainly seen the people coming in who don't have the commercial experience do have quite a lot of computer literacy. But again, maybe we're lucky and we're shiny enough that people are excited and they're coming. I don't know if I'd have the same answer if I was in a different industry.
I think working in the climate space, it's hard to get away from the extent to which we are not investing, financially or in terms of time and headspace enough in the challenge. And in that sense, I think the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service, and Jamie here started the Climate Intelligence Service, so do find him at the pizza as well. There's a lot of ways in which it's really innovative and it's bringing new ideas, but there's also this sort of confusion, I think, which is why didn't this exist before? Why is it that we have 32 different local authorities in Scotland doing all these different things, developing these different processes? So I think speaking from the climate and co-benefit space, there's just this enormous open goal that we're, currently, we've kind of left there for a little while, but that we should be taking advantage of.
Any more?
I think we're doing a lot in the space to collaborate. I think that there's definitely an openness between certainly amongst local authorities, public bodies, and private sector to try and plug that gap. But we can always be doing more. The scenario there of the 32 local authorities all finding their way. You can extrapolate that out to building owners, estate managers. Everyone is out doing the same thing with this largely the same consultancy group, being sold the same products to do something that we really could do once. And that's the kind of innovation that would be the kind of call to arms, is to say, lay this out on the table for people and say, actually, if you just do this, you'll all be able to plug into that, and it would be one push. And yeah, a lot of the conversations start with why did we not start doing this in the 90s? And that's still where we are today.
No, I can see that, and Buta consultancies, I'll add to that. But off the, I think last one from me before I open it up to the crowd. If you were starting today in the industry and you wanted a role that was very data heavy or analytics focused, would you have any advice for people in that position of like who to reach out to or what to focus on? Because there's a lot of new tech out there and it's hard to kind of pick a path.
Something that that's always stood out to me when someone's applying is if they've taken the time to go find an interesting data set and work on it. It doesn't always have to be part of their job or their research, but yeah, entering a competition or just giving really clear examples where you're like, I got stuck on the bus. I'm just trying to think of my day and like data examples. I got stuck on the bus and that made me wonder about congestion data and I did this mini project, look. And I don't really care what language they did it in. I don't really mind any of that, but it's that excitement and that passion that I think can sometimes get you through the door. The language, if you're wanting to, you can probably find out what the most common languages are. We use a lot of Python, but again, you can learn a language. It's more that excitement and that drive to find something out, and just being able to have a couple of examples for interview or something like that is always a good idea. I keep giving this back to you, might not want it.
I guess I would echo what I was saying before around finding a passion, whatever that might be, and that kind of relates to what you were saying. Not that it necessarily has to be technical, but I love butterflies and archaeology and the environment in general. I've worked in emissions reduction and now in biodiversity because I care about the planet. So you find about what it is that you care about and then focus yourself to that rather than, I guess, trying to become a data professional. That's one way to make a great contribution, but finding the thing that you care about first is more important than that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree there. If you're going to spend 40 plus hours a week doing it, right? Your turn. Does anyone have any good questions from the audience? There must be one. There we go. Right, you'll have to project loudly for the panelists.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. I'm more keen in the climate change, the climate aspect. I did a research on climate and looking at sustainability because I noticed that a lot of countries are putting in effort to, get a better climate compared to what we used to face. And when I did a check, I noticed that we have some challenge when it comes to sustainability because some years it fluctuates. the change in temperature keeps fluctuating. And I was asking, so what is the challenge? So I asked a lot of questions. Unfortunately, I didn't get the right person to ask. So I decided to write even a LinkedIn post and then just put it up there. So when you go to my LinkedIn page, you see that research that I did. Yeah, so how sustainable it is, I mean, all the measures that you've put in place to make sure that basically we are looking at the next generation. How sustainable are they that when we leave this, when our generation passes on, the next generation can carry on and even do better? And if that's clear.
Thank you for that massive question. I mean, I don't want to sort of just turn everything exactly back to the work I do, but I do think this does speak to the co-benefits question, because if we don't address climate change, if we don't bring emissions to zero and then possibly below zero, then runaway climate change happens and the consequences are massive. But there are all of these other challenges we have as well. In the UK, there's the energy bills crisis, there's this looming social care crisis, and we need to find a way to bring these things together. We can't just focus on one thing at a time. And so I think the core of the challenge is it's not really co-benefits, because that's kind of it's frankly a little bit superficial. It's, here are some other benefits of doing climate actions. It's how do we in a integrated, systemic, cross-cutting way think about challenges. And not everything we have to do has to check every box, but how do we think about this in a little bit more holistically whenever we're thinking about policies or things our businesses are doing. I think that's where the answer sort of starts, I think.
Anyone else? I won't get any pizza until I get 5 questions. So here we go.
Thank you. Hi, Andrews. Question for you. So if you remember one of the very first graphs that we saw at the start, looking at the social gains for the amount of money invested. And I noticed that Belfast was quite large compared to Glasgow, even though the amount invested is quite roughly similar. What's Belfast doing that's very different from Glasgow for that marked change?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I mean, that's something we're trying, to be honest, to kind of figure out a little bit more. But there's a few things that are unique about Belfast and Northern Ireland. One is they have a lot of oil heating in homes, and that's a consequence of the natural gas networks just developed much later. The building stock is older. A lot of the biggest co-benefits, at least in our work, come from active transport and from changes to your transport network. And places where there's the least developed public transport is where you have the most there's the most potential for these social benefits. So I think those are few of the factors that make those two places different. But more generally, there are these common things between places. There aren't any places in the UK where we're anywhere near maxing out the public benefits of non-motorized transport, of walking and cycling, and buses, which are obviously motorized, but wider public transport over using our cars. That's common everywhere. And then you have these unique stories in places. So in Belfast, you have all these oil heaters, and those are really expensive. They're quite polluting. And so there's a unique opportunity. And it's kind of, a big challenge is what are the sort of common stories and what are the place-based things to inform action.
Sadly, it's not that Belfast is doing anything better, it's that their starting point is worse. Right?
and evidencing improvement in types of habitats, and especially for habitats that are not in the UK priority, because we do have a set of habitats which are important, and the UK priority habitat layer habitats which we're pretty heavily focused on, but that differs in different countries, and the importance there, I think, is going to, I guess, vary as that legislation spreads out.
I had a question up here near the front.
Thank you. I'm Jose. I have a question. So it's interesting to hear the perspective from quite different set of sectors. I think my question is, like, when you consider the direct impact and the rebound effects of climate calculations, how do you quantify based on in your own sectors? How do you quantify the emissions reductions or the climate impact of the actions that you're taking? Because a lot of the time we can see a link into how things might improve, net zero or emission reduction, but to quantify that seems to be a challenge. Are you seeing any improvement in that side of things?
That's another really good question. In the past, I think, certainly 20 years ago, we sort of didn't know what to do about a lot of GHG emissions, and so that we were even before the question of sort of quantifying, the use of hydrogen in a refinery, because it was still, it was in labs being tested here. And then, maybe 10 years ago, we figured out a lot of sort of the answers to different parts of the climate challenge, the answers at least technologically. There's obviously a lot of this is not a technological problem. And then I think, this period we're in right now, it's about developing the business models and developing the legislation, and it's really about this question you're bringing forward, which is how do we, we need kind of standard methodologies and processes of calculation, and we heard a lot about how there, we saw with the building stock, there are, most houses are far from the standard of a house that's built today, which is in turn very far from the standard, a set of much higher standards. So, having these common methodologies, agreeing on which are the ones we should be using those to design targets, those are, things that are actively being developed, but really at the core of the challenge.
I think that it's a huge opportunity area that we should have probably picked up on an earlier question in terms of understanding, in terms of a data environment, that we need to be able to see that. We need to quantify what we believe to be the outcomes that our investments are making. We have to get a better metric. We have to think about embodied carbon as well as in operation carbon, because we can say what the saving is in kilowatt hours per square metre, per pound of spent, but what we can't understand is, well, one measure might not be equal to another measure in terms of that embodied carbon. If you're buying a particularly carbon intensive product from the other side of the world and you're importing it here, actually you might have been net better off just leaving the property as it was before or turning the temperature down. So having access to that level of data would be incredibly useful. It's where we're moving towards, but it's definitely the next big growth area.
I've time for one more question. Right over here. You're on the stage.
So we know that AI has a big impact when it comes to emissions. So do you consider, when using AI, do you consider kind of like best practices or something in order to have less of an impact when using AI?
It's a really good question. So yeah, there's obviously a lot of energy, a lot of water use that people don't really think about when it comes to running AI models and doing the training and all of that. It's something that's on our radar, but at the moment, it's not something we focus on. We have different metrics like accuracy and the sort of usability of the models, but it's absolutely something as we get bigger that I'd like to spend a bit more time thinking about, because yeah, it's that hidden problem that people don't really like to focus in on. Don't know. No one else wants to talk about that.
When it's developing, so yeah, you're right, the more it develops, you'll start looking into it deeper.
I think from my perspective, that it's interesting to hear that there's a further stumbling block potentially that we need to consider before we even get to the point where we've got something workable that we could apply AI to in order to help us to process that. And I think that comes back to how do we measure our real terms impact of the decisions that we're making and have a whole holistic view of it.
Brilliant question. I think I'll misremember this, but there was a graph shown of, I think it's Google CO2 emissions, like jumping something ridiculous, like 40 to 60% in the last year off the back of all this new hype and the new data technologies being employed and stuff. And you think that's shocking, like a huge volume of processing being spent on all sorts of new, really easy to use and easy to throw away content and stuff that like actually isn't providing as much value as I hope it would. Thank you very much, everyone. Really good discussion. Appreciate it. If you've got really super secret questions you didn't want to share with me, I'm sure you'll be able to catch some of the panelists afterwards at the networking bit. But if I could have a final round of applause for our brilliant panel. So this final, final 5 minutes. 5 minutes have I got, Steve? Yeah, is something we started doing recently at these events, but community call-outs or shout-outs. So this is 5 minutes, open mic, 30 seconds. If you go a second over, I'll go mental. If there's someone you want to say thanks to or call out, if you've got a call for help, a call for papers, collaborators, whatever, now's your shot. Here we go, first one. So stand up and sort of shout into the mic so the people at home can hear you.
All right. So my name's Neville, and I'm running an event in this building on the 25th of September. I ran it last year, and it involved getting people like yourselves to come along as mystery guests for 16 to 20-year-olds, pupils at school or undergraduates, to quiz you for about 10 minutes to find out actually what you do. And then they move on around the hall and do it like a speed dating event. So by the end of the evening, you've got to talk to lots of people. We've heard about putting a bit of spark into their career path. And they've got to talk to people who are actually doing it for a real life job and where they might go in their future careers. So I've got flyers here where you can just sign up and register your interest to come along and be a star for an evening. There's refreshments provided, maybe not quite as good as a pizza, but I'd love to chat to anybody who's interested. I think it's on the Data Lab calendar on the 25th of September. If you actually don't want to talk to me, it should be there online as well. Was that 30 seconds? Thank you.
I let you off because it's a good cause that I like, so. Anyone else? Anyone else? Yeah, there we go.
So I run a networking event. Actually, Alan has live streamed the one in May, People Planet Pint. We get together once a month, anyone who's interested in sustainability, so I'm guessing it's right up your street. We get together in a pub, it's really informal. Every few months we do have talks where we invite people to talk about what's happening around Scotland, around Edinburgh. So the next one will be Fringe during August. Not sure exactly what date because I'm struggling to get a venue. But yeah, just Google People Planet Pint to get to the page, and then you'll see the following dates there.
Thank you very much. Any more for any more? I've got 3 minutes. No one's got any friends they want to say well done to or help they want, or no one's doing anything exciting. I've got one, but I know you've got one, actually, for Pre-Wired. So India, who I think is too shy to stand up, is organising a charity event to encourage young people to get into coding and learning data and software skills. And there's a hackathon next month. Yeah, knew I could bully her into doing this.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm part of an organisation called Pre-Wired, a charity organisation which our aim is to teach children to code and basically get kids into coding, get kids into careers in tech, anyone between the ages of 11 to 18. And we have our session coming up the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, 27th, 28th, and we're running a makeathon, a hackathon, which is actually sponsored by Pre-Wired, which is sponsored by Hypercube, sorry. And yeah, so if you've got any children that want to come along, it's free to come along, free to sign up. You can find us Pre-Wired if you just Google us. And then also, if it is something you're interested in giving back to the community, we do host sessions every Wednesday from 5:30 to 7:30, and just sort of sharing our knowledge with kids and helping them get into tech and helping them learn how to code. So both if you want to be involved in it, want to come as a mentor, or if you have children that are interested, yeah, feel free to get in touch.
Thanks and apologies for doing that. If no one's got any more, I might let you all go a minute early. Once again, thank you very much for your attendance and your attention tonight. It's much appreciated. And thanks again for our panelists for some brilliant talks and a really good discussion. There's a few things I wanted to sort of highlight just before I do let you leave. We are just bumping into what I mentioned earlier, the Data Fest and the Fringe event. So we are running the Geospatial Fringe. This sounds interesting, doesn't it? So this is a whole host of events to do with geospatial data and the ways it's used in and around Scotland and other places. Some of these will be face-to-face in person, the next of which is on the 7th of August. Right here, same format as tonight. You may be lucky enough to get me again. A mix of these are online as well. The best place to get involved with these and find out more is, as always, the Data Lab community. So that's the QR code. Jump on there, find out, or just Google it. It's like really easy. It's a brilliant community to get involved in, free of use, and organises a load of stuff like that. But make sure to get stuck in and reach out to me or some of the folks at the Data Lab who will sort of be hosting the event after this to find out more information. And then, yeah, just a thanks to, this is a whole host of the organisations that are involved and have been involved in running these events up and down Scotland. So there's a bit of a roadshow going on. Well worth getting involved with. So I think I've done my job. I've got a thumbs up. We're all good. Thank you again and good night.